Thanks for joining me today. I'm Emma Clarke and I'm Head of Product at Metapack. And as we approach the mid-year mark and peak season begins to take shape, I'd like to take a moment to look back so we can better prepare for what's ahead. So today I'm going to be sharing my top 4 recommendations to help you drive a stronger, more profitable outcome for this year's peak season. And these insights are grounded in real-world data from peak 2024. And they're drawn directly from Metapack's production environment. And we work closely with our customers to implement strategies that not only met expectations, but also significantly outperformed these baseline benchmarks. So I'll be walking you through specific examples and case studies that demonstrate how these strategies boost profitability, improve customer experience, and strengthen operational resilience. And resilience, I think, is something we all really need more than ever at the moment. We're seeing growing market consolidation. We're seeing global instability with war and also economic volatility. We've got ongoing industrial action that's impacting delivery. And now the real risk of a trade war. So unfortunately, I think this year's peak is shaping up to be even more challenging than usual. But I think that means it's even more important to focus on the basics. So I'm going to dive in and let's look at what we've learned and how we can use those lessons to build a stronger, more profitable peak in 2025. So in this session, I'm going to be drawing from Metapack's data and customer experiences to highlight key trends across our market. And where relevant, I'm also going to be incorporating external sources to provide a broader context. And hopefully Metapack has processed over 1 billion shipments and 15 billion tracking events. So we believe our data set offers a robust and meaningful sample frame for this analysis. And just quickly, before we dive in, a note on data privacy. So all of our data has been fully anonymized in accordance with our data processing policies, as have the case studies that I'll be sharing today. So let's get started. So I've got 4 key recommendations to run through with you today. So I'm going to start and talk about the impact of PUDO deliveries and how that can really make a successful peak. Next, I'm going to move on to the impact of delivery promise to your checkout conversion. I'm going to move on then to highlight how utilizing a mature multi-carrier strategy can make a significant difference to your delivery outcomes. And then finally, I'm going to look at fraud prevention and loss mitigation. And that's an issue that's really exaggerated by peak volumes. And look, the reality is that anything that's good for retailers in peak, that will deliver positive outcomes year round. But peak volume spikes put a massive spotlight on business challenges, and that exacerbates points of stress. But what the pain points of peak can also do is they can provide you with the justification and the necessary business case to invest in improving your delivery experience. So, I'll start with my first recommendation today. I can't quite believe that I'm going to stand here and preach about PUDO deliveries in 2025. And whilst PUDO, so that's pick up and drop off, it's nothing new, it's clearly woefully underutilised. And at Metapack, we have the data to prove that out-of-home deliveries can materially improve customer experience. So I'm going to go all in, and I'm going to state that I strongly believe that if you discount or offer PUDO free of charge over peak, overall you are going to save money and you are going to retain more customers. So what gives me the confidence to state this? Well, first thing is to call out that we've got a gap. So in December 2024 alone, collection options were presented over 100 million times across Metapack supported checkout. But despite that scale, actual adoption remains surprisingly low. And that's even across the largest e-com markets, the most mature markets. So if we take the UK, for example, PUDO was already minimal throughout 2025. That adoption was really low. But during peak, it dropped even further to less than 1%. And this isn't just a UK issue. Globally, the trend held. So in fact, across 211 territories, not a single parcel was delivered to a PUDO classified collection point. Now, look, I understand in many of these markets, the infrastructure to support a collection model just simply isn't there. But what really surprised me was Germany. where infrastructure is well established. But even there, Pudo adoption was less than 2%. And in markets like the UK and other low adoption countries, I believe the core issue was pretty simple. So shoppers just weren't incentivized to choose collection, especially during their busy festive period where they're out shopping and hanging out with their mates and drinking wine. It just wasn't the incentivization at checkout. So we know in densely populated countries there's a strong expectation for home delivery. But what we see in countries with a more dispersed population is we see a greater willingness to embrace out-of-home options. So I don't think anybody probably would have guessed this, but Finland topped our Pudo adoption leaderboard. And that's largely because home delivery there comes at a higher cost. And you can see, in fact, like the top 5 Nordic and Baltic countries in our country actually show a preference of Pudo above home delivery. Our Danish friends, they're also firmly committed to out-of-home collections. But then as we move to larger e-com markets like Spain and Poland, you start seeing adoption rates drop off to a bit below 20%. But either way, I think the message for these markets certainly is clear. If you're shipping to these regions, you really need to offer a diverse range of collection options at checkout. It's not a nice to have, it's essential to have that breadth of service offering, including collections, to meet customer expectations, but also to drive that conversion. And from our checkout data, it's clear that low adoption of collections isn't driven by a lack of awareness. So almost 44% of the consumer-driven queries were for out-of-home delivery. So they're aware of it at the point of checkout. And our platform, for example, we offer 1.3 million collection locations globally. So I think we're pretty confident that it's also then not a lack of choice. And you can see from the data on the screen, consumers consistently tell us in our benchmark report that we commission, they're telling us that they actually want to use these collection options. Particularly if you're a brand that targets Gen Z or city centre dwellers, they're pretty clear about their preferences. And we should also not forget that a lot of consumers are pretty familiar with this model because most would be returning through these types of collection locations. But if I go back to the gap that I mentioned, what we see is that preference is just not converting at the point of purchase. That preference is not materializing in the choices consumers are making at checkout. During peak 2025, less than 5% of the parcels across our network were actually shipped to Pudo locations. It's less than 5%. To be honest, that figure shocked me so much that I had to go back to our data team to get them to double check it because I was convinced it would be higher by now. In 2025, I was expecting it to be sort of 15, 20% by now, to be honest, and certainly in a lot of the major destinations. And this low adoption rate really infuriates me because we do a lot of work around exception management and reporting, and our data over peak showed that over 36% of exceptions that happened across the delivery chain in peak were in the final mile, and they were on the doorstep. And that's a significant and much higher proportion, certainly, than I was expecting, given the world we live in now. So we have more people working from home, we have leave-safe options, and obviously a large number of in-flight diversions. But what we also saw last peak was Pudo hit a near-perfect first-time delivery rate. So Pudo had an on-time delivery hit rate of 99%, over 99%, in fact. And that's versus just shy of 86%, for home delivery over the same period. Now, we also calculate that home delivery could reduce the environmental impact by as much as 66% per parcel. Now, we know, talking to our customers, we know that better on-time delivery increases repeat purchases and increases lifetime value. And we also know that better on-time delivery reduces operational costs. Now, I appreciate that not every order, every product, every location is compatible with a Pudo network, but certainly a significant of a number of the items that we help ship definitely would be. So, given we've seen the pattern of consumer behaviour and how low the adoption is now, could you incentivise Pudo over peak? Could you increase conversions? Can you even get customers to switch this pretty entrenched behaviour? So I'm going to look at a real life example for you to try and help answer that question. So one of our customers ran some A/B testing here in the Netherlands to using Metapack's delivery option product. And in their app, they offered free Pudo delivery to half of their users. During that trial, they predicted a 15% switch rate for home delivery. But the actual switch, it was 65%. So for context, I'm sure you guys know this already, but actually in the Netherlands at the moment, only 3.85% of users are using Pudo. So they go from 3.85% to 65% conversion. So for us, certainly, this test clearly showed that cost incentives can dramatically influence consumer behaviour. We can go back to our Finnish friends. They demonstrate this at scale. So where home delivery costs have naturally driven widespread adoption of collection services. Now, here's the disconnect. Our research shows that carriers typically charge slightly less for out-of-home deliveries. But according to our retail customers, those savings often aren't being passed on. And they need that reduction to not only incentivise their consumers, but to also help with setup costs or to support adding more carriers into their warehouse fulfilment model. And where carriers are offering lower Pudo rates, many retailers aren't passing these savings on to consumers or using them to incentivise the adoption like this customer. Except maybe for click and collect from own stores. Based on our research, most of the Pudo options over last peak were priced exactly the same or pretty similar to home delivery. So as a shopper, certainly living in the UK where it rains constantly, why would I go out of my way to collect a parcel to save 20 or 50 pence or cents? It's not a big enough incentive for me. So if you're looking to improve your delivery outcomes during peak and also to give you greater contingency, here's my first suggestion. I think this is really important. You need to step out of budget silos and consider the total true cost of shipping. So calculate the shipping cost savings, add that to the money saved on where's my order contacts and customer support, which is significant. When you've got a 99.1% first-time delivery rate versus an 82.8%, that will obviously drive more where's my order contacts. And then finally layer in that potential uplift in revenue from happier, better served customers. You may find that offering discounted or, I'm going to say, even free collection during peak it benefits everybody involved. So your consumers, they're going to get more reliable deliveries, which means fewer support issues. So therefore, your customer services teams, well, they're going to face less strain. Your brand will earn more loyalty and advocacy. Carriers, they will make a better use, more efficient use of their networks. And if there's any carriers listening to me, preferably pass the savings on to the retailers. Collection points, and that includes your own stores, will gain valuable footfall. And of course, last but not least, it's better for our planet. So my first recommendation is this. To run your own analysis, can you replicate what this retailer did? Can you shift consumer behaviour in peak and make your business more profitable in the process? So my second recommendation is linked to the services that you offer at checkout. And that does include Pudo, and I promise I will stop going on about Pudo in a moment. And anybody who knows me or spends any time with me will know that alongside collections, I'm pretty obsessed with delivery promise, particularly as an enabler for checkout conversion. And personally, I think that's never more important than when your e-com and your product teams are going to have invested such a high proportion of their budget to drive that peak traffic to your site. And I also think it's never more important in the world we're living in now, where all of those macroeconomic factors are influencing what people buy, how much they spend. Personally, I think those customers, that traffic, it's too hard to let it fail at the checkout, to let it fail at the final hurdle. Oh, sorry, my clicker's working. So why am I so passionate about delivery promise? It's basically because consumers tell me that I should be. In my job as head of product, I should be interested in what consumers want because that pulls up upstream into our customer base. And the reason I'm so passionate, as I say, is because they tell me, is because in our research, our direct research, 58% of consumers told us that if there's no delivery date, there's no purchase. And by that, they mean date, not date range, not date window, no 3 to 5 days. They want it on Tuesday, the whatever, and that's the date that they're expecting to see. And hand in hand with delivery promise also needs to come that offering that market appropriate delivery choices. So I've talked about how our Nordic friends love Pudo. If you're missing the right services or you cannot confirm when that order will arrive, you categorically will be increasing your cart abandonment rate. So we have organisations like Statista. They state the average cart abandonment rate is as high as 70.3%. Shopify tell us and measure that the average site conversion rate is as low as 2 to 3% of all visits. So personally, I think anything that you can do to even fractionally improve your conversion is actually going to have a material improvement on your revenue position. And again, this is so meaningful in that critical period of peak. And we know that dynamic delivery options, delivery promise, moves the needle, as hopefully I'm about to demonstrate. So another case study for you. One of our health and beauty customers recently upgraded their checkout with the Metapack delivery options product. And that was following some more rounds of A/B testing that we like to work on our customers with. And they introduced both a clear delivery promise as well as a broader range of delivery options at their checkout. Now, as part of that pilot, we benchmarked their cart conversion and customer services costs. And their final peak results were incredibly compelling. Hopefully you can see them on the screen. Their conversion rate rose by over 18%. So they went from 2.1% during the previous peak to the peak just gone, they went to 2.48%. Now, they had an average basket value of £68, and also looking at things like their Where's My Order or their Wismo contract costs, we calculated that this checkout upgrade delivered more than 7.5 million in incremental sales, as well as reducing peak service costs by over 175k. Now, with our support, they're refining this proposition again ahead of peak this year, and they're actually targeting a similar percentage uplift again this year based on the investment they've made in the technology and that delivery promise. And talking to their end consumers, the feedback was incredibly clear. It was actually delivery promise that had the biggest impact on that uptick. It was the main driver behind both the conversion lift, but obviously, probably self-explanatory, also driving down those Where's My Order costs with that guaranteed date. So, second recommendation. If you don't already have a dynamic, validated delivery promise in your checkout, this really should be high priority on your list. Every business, particularly at the moment, you need to maximise the return on your marketing, your peak marketing investment. And this is, I think, one of the most effective ways you can do this. And I'm passionate about this feature because time and again, Metapack's delivery promise has proven to reduce cart abandonment and really importantly for us, drive that top of the funnel growth. Obviously, if this is something that you're interested in considering, we're happy to share how we support some of the world's biggest retailers with this and how it can deliver really demonstrable and proven ROI. So, moving on to my third point. My third recommendation is to encourage you to move further up the multi-carrier maturity curve, which I will explain on my next slide. This more advanced approach not only helps you consistently meet your delivery promise that I just mentioned, but it also helps provide flexibility to recover quickly from warehouse delays. There's nothing worse than making a delivery promise at checkout and then failing in the operation and missing that date. Now, obviously, I work at Metapack, so if you know what we do, this probably sounds like a predictable recommendation from us. But what we found in peak 2024, which I will show you in a moment, we found data that reinforced what we've long seen. So retailers using a mature multi-carrier strategy consistently delivered better customer experiences and stronger delivery outcomes. And the business impact was clear. We saw higher revenue, lower costs, and therefore increased margins for those customers. So, my lovely graph. Overall, I'll just start with a headline stat. Based on the research that we did from our data, we found that probably only 1 in 14 retailers implemented what I'd call a mature multi-carrier strategy over peak. And I'll try and explain the journey and what it looks like. So we would find that retailers might start off with 1 carrier. Then you might move to having 1 carrier per country. And as these businesses grow, then our customer base maybe starts splitting services. So using one carrier maybe for next day and one for economy. Now, as you go further up the bend in the curve, we see our customers introducing more granularity. So you might have carriers based on weight breaks or product types or even delivery preferences. And at the very most advanced stage, at the peak of the curve, we see businesses layering on intelligent business rules and real-time data to optimize those delivery decisions. So to give you an example, at the peak, you might see a retailer automatically route a 2-kilo order over £150 to Croydon using a secure service from carrier A, and that's based on things like value and location and service suitability, rather than default to carrier B and C. But all too often, and I get it, I'm from an operational warehouse background, I get that this is tough, but we see shipping decisions constrained either by the limitation of the checkout or the operation. And while we understand that volume plays a huge role in shaping these decisions, what we see is even retailers with really high volumes and then hopefully stronger negotiating power, they also fail to embrace a true multi-carrier model. And we see even fewer leveraging real-time dynamic routing to make the most of their carrier contracts. So, one of the biggest advantages we think of multi-carrier strategy, particularly during peak and for this peak coming, is the ability to better mitigate inevitable service disruptions. So these are real-life graphs from one of our products from peak last year. And I'm trying to bring this to life using our Metapack intelligence reports to highlight what we would call delivery hotspots for you. So I've benchmarked 3 comparable UK mainstream carriers, so you can see how they perform side by side. And from the data, there's clearly regional regions. Hopefully at the back you can see the angry red and orange bits. In these reports you can drill down or zoom out, you can go down to a postcode level. But there was problems. In the UK over peak last year, Birmingham, Norwich, Glasgow all had delivery issues. And there's certain parts of London, they always light up as they would do. And I mentioned Croydon earlier, for those of you from the UK. Croydon stood out in particular this year across every carrier. So Croydon recorded the highest number of issues across the UK for the entire peak 2024. So if you are from the UK and you're based in Croydon, I would definitely suggest you start your Christmas shopping earlier next year, because it was a nightmare. And when you compare these examples, obviously this is much better on our reporting, but just for the purposes of this slide, you can see that you can pass volume to each carrier based on their performance, their live performance. So you can see that Carrier A, for example, they performed really well in Birmingham, but had severe delivery issues up in Scotland, in Edinburgh and Glasgow. Carrier B, well, they did better than most in Scotland, but they also missed in Birmingham. And then Carrier C performed better in the northeast, northwest, and also much of Wales. Now, this is for UK only. We have capabilities to look at this in different countries, but this is a type of capability we have. And I think this data can actually be incredibly valuable in helping you choose the right carrier for each delivery area. You can get the data, but to truly unlock its potential, you need to go beyond static selection. So you need to layer on those dynamic allocation models and real-time shipping rules to make sure you can actively respond to shifting carrier performance. So while the data itself is incredibly powerful, what sets world-class delivery management apart is that ability to monitor and to react at a granular level. Now, it's not going to be real-time, but best I think you can hope for is near real-time because of the impacts into the warehouse and the operations. And based on the research we did, the results speak for themselves. So retailers who adopted this approach consistently hit significantly better on-time delivery times during peak. So how would we quantify that? How do I prove that to you? So what's the real impact of deploying a multi-carrier strategy? So I'll start with the big question. And this is global, this isn't just the UK. Across our entire real estate, what was the actual delivery performance last peak? Now, the data on the screen you can see is actually showing the end-to-end performance. So this isn't just the in-flight final mile. This is from warehouse processing to final delivery. And I use that because we think that's what actually consumers care about. Like, they don't care where an issue happened. They just want their gifts or their bargains delivered when they expected them. This goes back to delivery promise again. And so we've used that mindset to shape our approach, and we've actually used late deliveries as the key performance indicator because, again, that's what consumers tell us they care about. So our estimate, over you can see in the diagram, over the specific period of peak, only 82.8% of parcels, I talked earlier about billions of parcels, right? Only 82.8% of those arrived on time. And that is noticeably lower than non-peak performance, where we typically see that in the high 80s, low 90s. Like every year, we're going to have extreme weather, it was wet and windy and all the rest of it, and there's other seasonal factors that would have played a role. But those challenges hit across the entire carrier delivery base. And what we also saw is a significant performance gap. So the equivalent carriers we benchmarked, the top performing mainstream carrier delivered 95.8% on time, whilst the lowest performer failed to deliver 57% of their parcels on time. So that kind of spread really, I think for me, brings to life why it's so critical that you spot failure patterns early and that you have a carrier contingency in place, and also really importantly, the tech and operational agility to pivot fast. Massive difference between 57% failing and 98% on time. So I talked about, can I prove this? So we isolated, over the same period, we isolated the on-time delivery performance of customers who we feel leverage a mature multi-carrier strategy. And that's versus the rest of the base. And hopefully the graph speaks for itself. A 50% improvement in on-time delivery from deploying that strategy. So a 50% shift if multi-carrier was deployed. Now, based on my background, again, I'm not underestimating the commercial and the operational impact of implementing a top-tier carrier allocation strategy. But I think halving the number of delayed parcels certainly makes a very compelling business case. So any steps you can take to move up that maturity curve will increment your business towards these types of improved outcomes that we see. In addition, we've got strikes, we've got consolidation, we've got other impacts in the logistics industry. So the other benefit of multi-carrier is it also delivers that vital contingency, that vital business continuity planning. So in addition to those delivery outcomes, in this volatile world, I would really be making sure that you have those business continuity, you have your contingency plans in place to really help sure you can, at a minimum, continue to ship. And that's especially over peak, where it's unlikely, certainly in recent years, it's unlikely that carrier is going to pick up new volume if your primary carrier fails. Now, as I said, obviously, multi-carrier is a key part of what Metapack does. And if you're interested, then please come and talk to us and we can help explain how we could advance you up that curve. So my final thought. This is a hot topic with certainly our customers at the moment, and that's fraud and profit protection. Also, the significant issue of loss. So it's a year-round challenge, obviously, but I think peak amplifies the risk. You're hopefully shipping higher volumes, probably with higher basket values, and I think that naturally becomes a more attractive target. So at the same time, your customer services teams are probably stretched thin. They may be leaning towards more overly cautious policies, maybe defaulting to trust when a customer claims a item hasn't been received. And then you add to that probably increased reliance on temporary or agency staff across both customer services and probably in your fulfillment operation. And in this case, the potential for errors or maybe even exploitation rises significantly. And I think all of this makes it really far more important, far more critical to make sure you have robust loss prevention strategies in place ahead of peak. Now, we all know that theft can happen across the whole chain, and that's driven probably by different actors, but all with the same intent. So the aim is to defraud and steal from e-commerce companies. Research from Retail Economics and 3Vision stated that nearly 43% of employee research was actually from distribution centres, not from retail. And that's obviously a massive threat for both retailers and 3PLs that they need to focus on minimising. But for my final recommendation, I want to move further down the delivery chain, and I'm going to focus on delivery loss and doorstep theft. And this is an area where I think we have valuable data and case studies that hopefully can provide you with practical inspiration. So I'm just going to quickly touch on how you can better identify and reduce loss and theft, and ultimately, hopefully, help you protect your profits in peak and beyond. So, hopefully we all agree that one of the most impactful exceptions for both retailers, carriers, and probably consumers as well, where it's legitimate, the most impactful risk is lost parcels. So not only does this result in lost revenue and margin, but it also damages customer trust and loyalty. So while Metapack, we do work with some of the world's leading, well, most of the world's leading brands, we just present a proportion of the market or represent a proportion of the market. So for a broader view, FedEx, for example, commissioned Effigy Consulting to analyse peak 2024, and they estimated that 6.2 billion parcels would be shipped across the UK and Europe last year. And given that figure aligns with other industry benchmarks, I'll be using that as a baseline for my next raft of calculations. So if you take a look at the top row, it shows the percentage of parcels flagged as lost at any point during the last peak. And it shows a modest 0.06%. But if we use the 6.2 billion, that equates to about 3.7 million parcels that were lost. So that's obviously a significant impact to your business. But one of the biggest challenges we uncovered this peak was actually the lack of visibility into the true in-flight loss numbers. And without real-time insight, it becomes much harder for retailers to manage customer expectations, whether that's proactively or even reactively. So Metapack data enables us to go a step further. So we can identify parcels that are potentially lost, even if they haven't been flagged as lost by the carrier. So on the bottom row, these numbers represent the percentage of tracked parcels where no tracking status was received for 5 days. So tracked parcels, no tracking updates from the carrier within 5 days. And this figure jumps to 0.7%. Now, in our Metapack Intelligence product, that threshold's configurable. But for this analysis, we've chosen 5 days because we think it's more than reasonable for tracked parcels across the peak period. Now, of course, some of these parcels may eventually arrive. There could have been tracking issues or maybe even doorstep scan failures. But if we apply that percentage back on the 6.2 billion, this jumps from 3.7 million parcels by another 39.5 million parcels that are at best unaccounted for, or are at worst genuinely lost. Now, either way, your customer services team, they can't manage customer expectations without access to this kind of insight. And like I said before, the financial impact isn't just it's not just limited to the immediate loss. It extends to things like customer lifetime value, repeat purchases, and also driving up your customer acquisition cost. So I'm rubbish at maths, but I'm going to give it a go. I'm going to have some fun with some numbers. Glass half full, of course. I won't use my big scary numbers. So we'll use the officially declared loss numbers, so 3.7 million. The average basket value, obviously it might depend on your industry, but the average basket value in December last year was £117. So there was 435 million in lost revenue unknown attributed to these 3.7 million lost parcels. If you add in the cost of shipping replacement items, which is another significant cost here, we add in another 9 million, and that's based on average enterprise shipping rates that we see. There's another 20 million to add in customer services costs just to manage those where's my order costs. So at a high level, we're looking at roughly £125 per lost parcel. Now, your business, you might have lower basket values, you might have cheaper shipping rates, good for you, or maybe you've automated your customer services. So that figure might seem high, but hopefully you get the point. And these numbers here, that doesn't take into account the longer term damage. It doesn't consider lost retention, reduced lifetime value, and the impact of frustrated customers becoming vocal detractors and hurting your revenue as well as your brand. So if you're still with me on the maths, this is the big number on the big screen. Based on 3.7 million lost parcels, we estimate that the cost of lost parcels to the EU retail industry during peak last year is over £460 million. And that's me being generous. If I want to be more pessimistic and take our number, using our projected loss rate of 43 million parcels, obviously the numbers jump significantly. We're talking 5 billion in lost revenue, 105 million in shipping costs, 234 million in managing WSMO queries, which blows my mind, quite frankly. And that brings it to a staggering 3.5 billion as the total cost. Now, I mean, the truth will lie somewhere in between, I suspect, in between those two extremes. But even that lower amount that you can see on the screen is pretty alarming, especially for an industry fighting to protect margins and fighting to retain customers due to all the strong economic headwinds that we're facing. And that's why at Metapack we strongly recommending, whether it's our product or something else, but obviously hopefully ours, but strongly recommend investing in tooling to really try and understand your true loss figure, your true loss exposure. A solution like ours, we don't just show declared loss, we highlight potential losses. You can filter by carrier, by service type, by location, all these different things to hopefully give you the insight that you need to act. And that could be, for example, triggering a replacement order before your complaint arrives. Carriers, but it could include filing a carrier claim for those increased lost parcels. And really importantly, I think it should include switching providers when the loss rate from a certain carrier spikes. So it's this type of visibility, this type of granularity that can put you in control. And my final thought last thought on doorstep fraud. So the case study I'd like to share with you is from one of our customers who was suffering from doorstep thefts and fake denial of receipt claims. Now research shows that sportswear is 3 times more likely to be stolen than other goods because of branded packaging and also the high resale value of the goods. And boy, was our customer suffering, sadly. So to the tune of £1 million a week of disputed orders. Now, I feel like this should be a fake case study because it's so good and the numbers are so extreme, but this is genuine. You can talk to our customer about it if you'd like. But what they were able to do, which was really critical, is they were able to dig into their data to understand patterns of spend, of product, of bad actors. And then at Metapack, we crafted a solution using that layered shipping logic I talked about to divert certain orders via a fully secure service. So some more A/B testing. The end solution was that we routed orders over £200 containing certain products or being delivered to specific people or specific areas onto this service. Now, this is again my point about multi-carrier. You need that breadth of carrier service and the functionality to build out their dynamic shipping rules to execute this sort of approach. But hopefully on the screen you can see the amazing outcomes they achieved. And these data points are specific for the trading period of peak last year. So yes, they took a small hit on increased cost of delivery, but they reduced their disputed deliveries by 90%. 90%. So over peak, they saved almost 6 million in replacement stock and over £500,000 in redelivery charges. And they did all of that by removing the opportunity of theft from the delivery network. They removed the opportunity of theft from the doorstep and politely even from their own customers. So we strongly recommend trying to identify similarly these areas of theft and fraud across your supply chain and your delivery network and testing creative solutions like this case study. Now, Metapack, none of the carriers even can prevent every lost parcel. What we can do is help shine a light on where problems are so you can reduce their impact on your customer experience and in turn your bottom line. And I think that's really important at peak, in that battleground of peak. So that's it for me. These are my top recommendations to hopefully help elevate your customer experience, both in peak but also year-round. They are flashed on the screen. We built out some capability to benchmark all of this data. So shout out to my product and engineering team. Thank you for listening. If you want to visit us, we're on stand B49 if you want to talk about any of the issues that I've raised today or any of the solutions we've discussed. But our goal here is to help our customers strengthen their multi-carrier strategy, build a high-impact delivery promise and checkout experience, and really help our customers understand the true cost of delivery loss on your business. And that's always one-minded goal, basically, to help you achieve a more profitable and resilient peak in 2025. And thanks again for everybody at Metapack, and I think I've got a whole 2.5 minutes left for questions.
I don't know if you can hear me now.
I can hear you now. Yes.
Emma, I've never heard of Croydon.
Croydon.
Never heard of it. Must be a beautiful town, but
no.
Oh, okay. It must be a horrible town to live in. But if I am a retailer, well, first question actually, why? The cliffhanger. What went wrong there?
Sorry, I can really hear myself. I'm gonna have to turn that off. My own voice. It's to do with network patterns and distribution. It's a delivery black spot. So where will the carriers have the different routing, and it's to do with type of residence, like multiple occupancy dwelling. There's no leave safe, all that kind of thing. So it's a culmination of things. But each year it seems to be a bit of a black spot. So some carriers did better than others, and I think it's whether the carriers can improve across their network, their performance in that area, or it's about making sure that if your checkout is, the checkout you're sending something to Croydon, that you make sure that you extend the delivery promise to truly reflect the reality of the delivery network in your local area.
So if I'm a retailer that for the first time is going to deliver to Croydon in the UK, based on the full recommendations that you have, where would you suggest I start?
It all starts at the checkout. So, like I said, in the industry and the climate we're in now, it's so vital to get your checkout experience nailed down, to make sure that you're providing accurate, validated solutions and calculating an accurate transit time and delivery promise. Most people, particularly over a peak, are willing to accept, a 24, 48-hour turnaround. If you miss-promise or you under-promise or you over-promise at checkout, then you're just, you're falling at the first hurdle. And that customer won't come back, they won't buy again, they'll tell all their friends about how disappointing that experience was, and you'll have paid a lot of money to drive them to your site probably for no return.
Now that my curiosity about Croydon is solved, thank you for that moment. If you have a question, you can submit it through the QR code. If you're brave enough to state your name and your company, you can also ask the question to Emma in person. While you get a little bit thinking, Emma, I still have one question.
Yes.
I'm curious to see your perspective on, which is there's so much happening in this industry.
Yep.
It seems like every day something new pops up. What trend are you really excited for that will change, and maybe how will it change this industry?
I'm not going to talk about AI. I think we're all excited about AI, but fed up of hearing about AI. For me, I think the trend that we're watching a lot of is distributed supply chain. So a lot of our customers now are considering the cost of holding stock, where they hold stock. So things like dropship vending models are growing. People are reselling each other's products on their platform. And how do you execute shipping, shipping from one warehouse now, potentially. We've just got a customer, we've just built out 4,000 stores from them to ship from. And that also includes a dropship vending model. So I think that's one of the challenges and the opportunities for our customer base, is to sell more product on their website, almost become like a micro marketplace. So not an Etsy or a Vinted or whatever type marketplace, but turning their e-com platform and leveraging their brand equity to sell other people's products, but not necessarily have to deal with all the warehousing and the logistics side of it. So I think that's something that a trend that's going to grow, and some of our largest pure retailers who would never have touched that before are now moving into that space. And I think that makes sense with, the cost of moving things from A to B. Like, why would you consolidate all the stock in one place? So I think AI will probably support that. I'm not going to talk about AI, I promise. But I think that's one of the interesting things, certainly for us and our customer base, is what do you sell? Where do you store it? Where do you ship it from? And how do you make sure all of that is orchestrated back to the checkout again, so you can describe the delivery experience and the times to your customers?
We got quite a couple questions from the audience around multi-carriers.
Yes.
Maybe to pick out one, hopefully that question covers a couple of you guys' question, which is, how does Metapack support checkout and the options around that to support multi-carrier strategies?
This is I know you shouldn't have, as head of product, you shouldn't have a favourite product, but my checkout product is my favourite child. So one of the powers of Metapack is we would configure on behalf of our retailers all of the carrier choices that you want to use to a warehouse level, and we would configure all of your warehouse and your opening times and how your warehouse will operate. And we configure that for your shipping or not, if you don't want to use this for shipping. And then what we do is, via an API, is we serve that out into a checkout. So the power of our checkout, a combination of our checkout and our shipping product is it's a single unified configuration. If, based on the data I showed you, like a carrier fell over in Birmingham and you wanted to turn it off, you can turn it off in that config and it's immediately reflected into your checkout. So if that was your last next day carrier that had already left your warehouse at 4 o'clock and you couldn't offer next day anymore and you turn it off live, we will no longer return that as a result to your checkout. So the power of our product is you can add in contingency in multiple carriers to affect your next day, your same day, your stated day, your time slot service, and you configure it once from your logistics and shipping perspective. And as long as your checkout is laid out for those different service offerings, we will validate that for you. So we won't allow you to offer a next day or a stated day if the rules exclude it. And I think that's the challenge, for a lot of people doing multi-carrier, is how do you reflect those carrier contingencies or that breadth of carrier choice into your checkout? And that's what our product does for some of the largest retailers in the world.
Thank you so much, Emma. Unfortunately, we're out of time. So if your question didn't get an answer yet, feel free to find Emma at B49 today or tomorrow.
I'm here tomorrow as well, yes.
Exactly, no time pressure. Thank you so much for joining us in Team Green this afternoon. And thank you, Emma, for sharing your experience.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for joining us. Thank you.